Welcome. I call to order the Town Council work session on the Capital Improvement Program. It is January 9th, and the time is 6:35. And if we could please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Tonight is our second night on the Capital Improvement Program, and on the agenda we have long-term financial and capital budget programs, open space parks and recreation programs, senior services programs, and then long-term financial programs, fair share development fees, affordable housing exemptions, in lieu fees for affordable housing. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Alford. Thank you.
Okay, this evening we're going to deal with all of the subjects that Ella has just listed. There's a handout this evening. We'll go through those slides. The first sets will be dealing with the open space, recreation, and leisure service programs on the long-term projects. Then from there we'll jump into the projects associated with the pay-as-you-go portion of the program. So let's get started. The first major project is the Open Space Acquisition Program. That is an ongoing program. Over the past 13 years, 26 projects, South Kingstown has provided municipal funding, and this is found on page 34. So if you go to page 34, at this, with the 26 projects, there's about 1,505 acres of land that have been put into preservation at a cost of $7.6 million in South Kingstown dollars. Those dollars have been leveraged along with federal, state, and private nonprofit dollars to be able to preserve that 1,505 acres. During the last year, there was 65 acres that were added to conservation purpose for the town. 58 of those acres are associated with a land trust acquisition, and 6.5 acres was with the Federal Fish and Wildlife, who acquired additional property in the town. At this point, there's 11,305 acres that are in preservation at this time, which is about 17.7 square miles, or 31% of the land area of the community. As of today, there's $2.3 million available in additional bonding authorization that the town council would have access and use of were they to wish to spend additional dollars toward acquisition. Those bonds were authorized originally in 2006 and are available on an as-need basis. Also, at this point, there's about $416,000 in funding that is available within the open space capital reserve. One of the major funding sources associated with the capital reserve is monies that come in through the real estate conveyance tax. If you look at the next slide and the next page in the budget document, you'll see that real estate conveyance taxes are contributing approximately $290,000 in the current year toward the that is going into the open space acquisition reserve. Right now, real estate conveyance taxes are valued at $4. It's a tax of $4 per thousand on real estate transactions. Of that $4, $2.20 is held by the town. The $1.80 goes back to the state of Rhode Island. Of the $2.20, $1.70 of that $2.20 stays with the open space reserve. That's how the $290,000 is made available. Jumping back, you'll see that the open space acquisition program documents that we're spending about $460,000 a year in debt service to pay down some of the bonds that have been let for open space purchases. So even though we're taking in between $250 and $290 a year in real estate conveyance, we're still having property tax supports that are going in of about $150,000 toward that debt service. In the program that I've put before you, I've also indicated that we would anticipate an average of about $75,000 a year being available for additional acquisitions, or a total of about $450,000 over the next 6 years. Were there a project that came forward that required greater funding than that for consideration by the council, the resources that are available within the fund, that $400,000, or resources that are available in the $2.3 million would be available for council deliberation and possible use. If there's no questions, I would move on. There's a couple of maps there, and those maps ought to indicate what's the protected open space or conservation purpose to land in the community, as well as who owns that land. The second map shows the delineation of property that was acquired post-1999, when the open space acquisition program was initially established, and that which existed in advance of that prior to 1999. The second project that's listed is the bike path connector at Broad Rock Playfields to the South County Commons. This is a scenic pedestrian or bicycle pathway that would connect the Broad Rock Fields to the Commons. It's a project that we've talked about for several years. Initially, the town had received a grant consideration to be able to install this. At that time, we were not able to move forward. First, we had to get wetlands approvals, and secondly, the difficulty was that we did not own all of the property. We have put forward a project that would provide paving of all of the bike path area that's under town's ownership. What we have also done is we have submitted a grant which is currently pending with the Rhode Island Recreation Acquisition and Development Grant Program through DEM. It's a 50-50 grant match, so that we've received an easement from the property owner at South County Commons, and that easement, according to the state and the application that we filed, would be sufficient for us to be able to have a 50-50 grant that would allow for the connection and the paving and the completion of the entire bike path. Without that grant support, the project that's before you would end at the town boundary. This is the YMCA Senior Center. This is our property line. From here to here, we have an easement that's in place. The connection will be probably closer to this building here with a series of switchbacks to the path. This is a very important project because it meets comp plan requirements, it meets greenway requirements both at the state and the local level. It also provides an access to multiple points. It will interconnect the Commons with everything from the YMCA to the Senior Center to the Broad Rock School to Old Mountain Field. So it is a very important construction that will be a real asset to the community. The costs are somewhat high in what we've predicted costs to be, solely because many of this area is either traversing a wetland or is tree-lined and cantilevered tree-lined area, which is going to create some logistics problem in terms of getting the heavy equipment in there to be able to first put the base down, and secondly to be able to put the final bituminous concrete surfaces down. So we've got a liberal budget that's here in terms of what projected costs will be. But if we are fortunate to be able to get the grant would be at about $300,000. We're looking at a budget right now of $275,000. If we needed to increase that to $300,000, it can be done with the use of additional monies out of the recreation impact fees. there are sufficient funds there for council to advance in addition to the $275,000 that we're showing in this program at this point. Success of the grant would also mean that we would be able to do that construction probably this summer. Carol, question?
Steve, if we don't get the grant money, are we still going to go forward with our portion of it?
That's correct. People are using that.
And one other question, if the 50/50 that we do get, so we'll finish off the bike path, but the property owner at the Commons, there'll be no cost to him for all the work that's done? So the 50/50 would be 50 the grant and 50 from the town?
That's yet to be determined, because we would look at whether in-kind could be used and whether or not any value toward the easement could be considered within the $600,000 grant.
Mm-hmm.
But at minimum, we would see that there would be hopefully a $300,000. We've applied for the full $600,000 in hopes that we can put together some type of program that looks at soft sharing.
And if we just pave halfway, is what it looks like, halfway between the two, what would we do then? Just wait and see if the property owner of the other property would come forward at that point, or do it at a later time? How would we finish it off?
Well, at this point, we would have to look at whether we would want to continue using municipal dollars on that private property that were coming from tax base. What we think will occur is that people are using the gravel path at this point. So what we think will happen is they'll get much more traffic, will start there, and it will become an economic value to the property owner for them to become involved and to complete the project on their land. So it's, again, it's a fluid project at this point. The grant that Terry's put together is pending. I think that we should know that sometime next month as to whether or not the grant's going to be successful. This is another one of those grants that we feel pretty good about because of the criteria that DEM uses. We're meeting an awful lot of those criteria. And secondly, there's not a lot of communities that may have the 50/50 matches available to be able to advance recreation projects at this time. So based on the fact that you've got recreation impact fees that are readily available and available in your reserve fund, we've got a greater flexibility than some communities may have. If there's no other questions, I'll move along. Neighborhood Guild. Neighborhood Guilds is a 103-year-old structure. The last bonding that we did on that building was back in 1995. That was a 20-year bond. It was $1 million that was put forward. The final debt service payments will be in the 14-15 year. What we're looking at is having the $1 million bond go out in that first of the bond sales that we talked about last night. When we put out, I think it's about $7.1 million, that would go out in May of 2016. Any of these projects, what we're trying to do is to load the debt all at one time, because the upfront cost for going through the investment agencies as well as the bond council are expensive. So if we can load the debt all at one time, we get better bang for our buck. If we wanted to do the Guild project a year earlier, we possibly could. And what we would do is just to advance the money from general fund balance until the bond was actually let in May of 2016. I'm not sure that there's a need for that rush at this point. One of the other things that we want to see is where we're going on the community gym or field house, whatever we want to call it. Because one of the objectives is, that's tied to the Neighborhood Guild, is that if in fact we can build a community gym, what we would look to do with the Guild is to make that more of a recreation arts type center and pull away any of the active recreation activities that are there and have those centralized at that new facility. That may change what the priorities would be with the $1 million on the bonding that we would take out on the Guild. So a lot of it's going to depend on how those two projects are going to link together. So we've got that scheduled at the same time that we'd be looking at that project involving the community gym. There's, any number of things on a 103-year-old building that can be done. Energy savings is certainly one of the major things as far as the window replacements. There is some needs for air conditioning within the building, as well as just some general renovation. So the costs that are there, we could spend $1 million, we could spend $1.5 million. But it just depends really on what we want that facility to be. In the long run, I think if that can become a passive recreation facility of the community and more directly related to those types of activities, with the spillover still going into the Peacedale office building for those type of activities, we'll be able to better manage the labor that's associated with those different types of programs. If there's no questions, I'll move on. The community recreation facility is the next project. Page 39 of your budget document, Terry had prepared for us this year, and I think is a very cogent explanation of why we need this facility at this time. And there's, within that description, the justification and documentation as to what existing uses are for indoor space. Our youth basketball program is using 85% of the available gym space between November and March of each year, which means that we displace any of the programs for our adult population or the multitude of programs that would like to have interior space use but are unavailable. Things like indoor tennis, volleyball, soccer. What pickleball is, I'm not sure, but I'm sure Terry will have an explanation on it.
It's what?
But one of the things that we talked about last night is when you look at the demographics of our community, things are changing. And what we need to do is to make sure that we have recreation space available for all of ages, and to ensure that, from a healthy community perspective, we need to have the play space available for all different groups, and to be able to do initial training with kids on different sports so that they can become lifetime activities for them to stay healthy. This type of a facility is going to be necessary. I've increased the cost of that program estimate to $5 million. It's a 25,000 square foot facility. At this point, we've got a few bond issues that are in place to pay down the cost, and we're also looking at recreation impact fees that would be used. We're showing at this point $850,000 in the rec fees. The facility would be located right behind or right alongside of the senior center. When we purchased the remainder of the Savio property, what we wanted to look at is the ability to build a potential of 2 different buildings of 25,000 square feet apiece. This facility would be only one of those 2 buildings. But for the long-term planning, our objective has been, since we began the acquisitions at Dominic Savio, is to be able to centralize many of the municipal services or activities as a means of, one, reducing what our cost of transportation is to get equipment to and from our different recreation sites, as well as to be able to deal more efficiently in terms of things such as the fiber that needs to go to these facilities, so that we're centralizing things in certain locations. We also, at the time that we purchased the Savio property, agreed with the diocese that we would provide them with the ability to construct a soccer field at this location within 5 years of the acquisition. We have, with council's permission, continued that because we're not prepared to build the parking lots that would be the quid pro quo. But that soccer field would fit within that space where we would have the potential for 2 25 square foot buildings, adequate parking for those recreational activities, direct access to the bike path that would get you either to the Commons or down to Old Mountain Field, The seniors would have direct use. All of our play fields would be connected, as well as the recreational facilities at the Broad Rock School. So this is a centerpiece for where the community would go for recreational activities in the future. If 5, 10, 15 years from now, the community wanted additional activities, whether it was a sheet of ice, whether it was a pool, or whether it was a second gym, a mirror image of the gym that you would build, the community would have the space. One of the biggest problems communities run into is that they don't plan for the land needs of the future. And if we can buy, so we looked at this and we said, let's buy the properties so that councils in the future will be able to address what the needs are of that population at that time. This gives you a master plan idea as to where we're going, and we've been very successful with the construction of the school, the construction of the play fields, construction of the tennis courts, as well as the senior center. And if we can get that bike path punched through, then I think that we've really brought an awful lot of things together. But the cost, I think, is probably in the $5 million range. I am concerned, and I've said it to you each year, is that we will also have to look very seriously at not just the debt service that would be associated with this project, but what the cost of operations would be. Because a facility of this nature, particularly if we're going to allow late night use of it for different adult activities, is going to require both supervision and custodial services, as well as the persons that are running the programs. So there's a number of ways that can be addressed. Obviously, we would charge for use of the facility with different leagues or different programs that come forward. But that is not going to return the revenues necessary for the entire facility. So it will have property tax impact in addition to the impact that you'll have associated with the debt service coming in. As I've said to you before, I don't see any difficulty with the debt service because our loading and deloading of existing debt will balance out. But there will be community cost in terms of the initial year of setting up that as a component of part of your general fund. What we may look at is to set that up as a special revenue fund and have it so that it has its revenue source and has only a transfer coming in from general fund as a means of us really being able to capture true cost of operations. There may be some cost savings. Hopefully we will not be paying the same custodial costs associated with this building as we do for use of rental school buildings. So there's those type of things that are going forward. But I think the main thing that we need to do is to make sure that the community has a commitment for this project. That, I think, is what is the reason why we're asking for another $1 million in bonding. The bonding authorization goes back on these projects to 2004. Is the community still willing 10 years later to be able to support this type of an activity? The litmus test can be putting another $1 million before the voters in November of this year to say, with that, we will construct the facility. The facility can be online in 2016. So that's a decision that the council's got to make in terms of the approval of your capital improvement program and what items you send to the General Assembly for referendum question. So those are, that's a clear decision that has to be made, because if you're going to put another bond issue onto the ballot, you're going to have to do a cell program on that in terms of providing a good deal of public information, and you're going to need to get the public input as to whether they feel that's an appropriate expenditure or a need rather than a want. So we think that it's not a want anymore. We think it has risen to the level of need. But I think at this point, you do need to look at another $1 million in bonding to be able to make this a reality. The other thing is that one of the bonds was a school bond, and the reason we were doing that is we were looking to attempt to get 30% reimbursement aid from the state. Since 2004, there's been a lot of rule changes. I don't expect that there'll be any monies in terms of state reimbursement under the school construction formula that would be available for this project, which was something we were hopeful for when we looked at this. This is not to say that we wouldn't have major activities that, for interscholastic sport activities occurring at this facility. This would give us opportunity to have a proper place for the basketball, for wrestling, for volleyball, outside of the confines of the high school facility today. And it would provide balance, because if those weren't available, it would make the high school gym available for us to switch programs over at certain times. It's not to say we wouldn't need the high school in operation for the gym. It's just a case where this would provide an appropriate venue for our community to showcase its athletic programs, as well as the programs that we run for, particularly, during break time with the schools. We run different programs where we invite other schools in. We've always been very, very proud of our recreational fields. This will give us an opportunity to, again, be able to showcase our community with an indoor facility. What have I missed on this, Terry, as far as the different programs and the need?
You really touched on just about everything, Steve. The only thing that I would add is that, this community has continued to grow into this highly active community in every demographic. As people are aging, they're still remaining very active. We see that need. We see these adult leagues not having the space any longer, particularly basketball and those that need the indoor facilities. And as that component continues to grow, we continue to shrink in terms of what we can offer until we have something larger, or in addition to what we already have.
Terry, the only question that I have is the outdoor skating rink. What is the status on that, and will it ever resurface?
We've had discussions, staff has had discussions kind of on a very broad level in terms of temporary rinks that could be purchased for a minimal amount of dollars in terms of an initial capital infusion, locating possibly at Old Mountain Field or any particular park where it could be set up temporarily for a season. The only issue with that is it's so weather dependent, and some seasons, we might get 3 days of skating out of this investment. That's really the big issue with.
So is that the reason why, we stopped that? Weather
It's been a
dependent?
number of years, and I don't recall since I've been here, we've not had a skating rink, but that definitely is one of the reasons. I believe it was over at the Village Green for a bit.
It's Terry's fault that we don't have it anymore.
I'm looking at the weather that we have nowadays. It's like,
This year would have been perfect.
there would be some good skating.
Other questions?
Yeah, will seating be provided there, the fold-up seating? Could we actually have interscholastic league play there if it were done right?
Yes,
Enough
the design
seating?
would include bleacher sections, most likely the push, the collapsible bleachers, so that we could condense it to one gymnasium with the bleachers coming out, or push the bleachers back so that there are multiple
See, one of
court
the things,
spaces.
you've got 290,000 targeted within that $5 million budget, which was for furnishings. But a lot of the questions that need to be addressed is what it is that we are building. Are we building a rectangular building that simply is a gym, or are we building a rectangular building that has a section set aside that would be for the changing rooms, those types of things? Is it going to have a showers? Because if you're going to go into Scholastic, you've got to have the showers, and you've got to have, it starts adding on to the project. So when we look at this, we've got to come up with, once we get full approval, we're going to have to do the design and be able to show what the cost differences are on those different things. But the original thought was at minimum that there would be full bleachers, that would be there, and they would be breakaway, so that you could get them out of the way. You would also, decisions will have to be made on what type of floor. Are you going to go with a wood floor? Are you going to go with with a composite floor, which is going to have greater versatility in terms of the different or multiple uses that could be occurring on those floors. So there's a lot of that. We've seen some municipal facilities that, have gone into the $10 million range. It just depends on how much you want to put in. Some communities have also gone with fitness centers that are attached to these type of facilities because they provide a cost center for the community. Unfortunately, one of the things the council needs to be very careful of is not to go and provide something which will be in competition with the private sector. So we don't want to start putting in a fitness center if in fact it's going to have impact on those facilities that are within our community. Just as the schools had the difficulty when they started looking at preschool programming and what impact that was having on the preschools that existed in the community. So there's those type of things. There's a lot of things that need to be pieced out and then discussed to understand what it is exactly would be in the town's best interest on the facility that they would build. Carol?
Steve, I think you'd have to have locker rooms in it. If you're going to invite interscholastic leagues into it, you absolutely have to have locker rooms and
One of the
showers.
reasons we're up to the 5 million.
Yeah. And I think the other thing we'd have to think about is how much of it, like, is it going to be geared towards the high school and especially the high school? And will they occupy it like most of the day and then maybe, will residents actually be able to use it? Or is it going to be like a school gym that is occupied by the students all day long,
Well,
I guess we'd have to,
The key here is that it's not going to be used by the students during the school day because there's no school close enough for that. You would assume that you would have that available for adult uses starting early in the morning, and that it may be after 4 o'clock that you would see it turn into a school purpose activity. If there was uses that occurred after 9 o'clock at night, it may well be that those would be night leagues that may be available for different activities. I think our objective would be to build a 7-day schedule that would try to hit every population demographic that we have with the needs that we've seen. We know indoor soccer, training for lacrosse, all of those different things can and will be done inside if the space was available. The closest large gym space that is available even for rent purposes is in North Kingstown up at Quonset. And that's being used for the most part for soccer purposes at this point. So yeah, there's a lot of questions that would have to be asked, but the real question is the community supportive of this? Once the council takes a position on it, your organized sport activity groups will also take positions in terms of assisting with selling the program, but there's nothing for them to sell unless the council's in favor of it. Okay, moving on, Marina Park. Marina Park is really a minimalist program at this point. What we're looking to do is to repave 2 of the lots. The east lot, which is the one closest to the coffee shop, would be stone sealed. The west lot, which is where the main trailer, boat trailer parking lot is and the restaurant is, would have a bituminous surface laid down on it. We're expecting to do that in the 14-15 year. Following year, we would look at doing renovative work on the boat ramp itself. We are not looking at doing anything with the east boat ramp. That really has been in disrepair for a number of years and really isn't available for use based on how low the water is at that location. But this would give us about $40,000 that would be used to retrofit the existing boat ramp that gets heavy use really for about 10 months of the year. The public dock and access improvements, those would also occur on an as-need basis, or we're looking really at the dock with another set of, another floating pier would be added to it to provide better service capability when there's more than one boat that's being put into the water, being set to the side while the trailer goes up, and another boat's going down. So we've got enough space for two boats, as well as the harbor master's boat during the summer hours. So at this point, we're looking at a budget of approximately $177,000 to accomplish those three program elements. This is another one of our facilities that we could spend a great deal of money on. However, at this point, we have not got a real focus in terms of doing other enhancements at that park. If we can see additional activities start to occur at that park, there may be other things that can be done. You know, Ella's question about the skating rink, that may be a location for a temporary skating rink. You've got the parking availability, and you've got the public visibility on Route 1. But these are all things that can be had based on what the community suggests that they want to see. And again, you've got some flexibility because you've got a good deal of money that's been collected over the years with the recreation impact dollars for the community. We move on. This is the items that I just talked about, the west and east lot, as well as the public dock. Public dock may need some interim work done on those on a yearly basis just to keep that up, because it does get a lot of use, and so too the main boat ramp. The next project is the town beach improvement. The lion's share of that program hopefully will be completed before we get into this fiscal year for the 14-15 year. We're looking at the pavilion relocation occurring this spring. That the engineering services have been approved by the council. The wastewater disposal system has been engineered and been approved with Coastal and with DEM. So we're now at a position of moving on with the actual relocation. As you can see, this was the condition that we were faced with after Hurricane Sandy. In fact, this doesn't do justice because we lost all of the seating area that was to the water side of that staircase. In fact, it was lost to such a degree that no remnants of it were ever found. And I mean, that was a major piece of construction. I had this slide prepared so that it would answer a question that Jim has asked a couple of times on how far back are you locating the pavilion, and is that behind where the projected shoreline change is going to be based on the 2050. This was a map that had been developed by Dr. Boothroyd, the state geologist. And what he is showing is this yellow line here is where he believes that the shoreline will be receding to by the year 2050. This is the location of where we will be putting the facility. If we were to map on here what he thinks the year 2100 would look like, we'd be underwater. But since it's a wooden structure, that's going to end up, if in fact he's correct, there's going to be another one that's going to have to be built back here. But we are far enough behind what the 2050 line would be based on the ocean engineering studies that have been completed by Dr. Boothroyd and have been accepted by Coastal as far as documents on the development of the beach special area management plan that is underway with CRMC at this time. The other items that we expect to do with the beach program is that sand replenishment as well as beach erosion mitigation efforts will have to be continued based on the changes that Coastal made in the SAMP plan. We will be able to submit applications to be able to provide some type of hardening along the town's beachfront as a means of being able to protect that investment that we have there. We also have a need to continue with the playground upgrades. That's slated out in later years, and also some parking lot improvements. We are not looking with parking lot improvements to expand parking as much as we are as to enhance the existing spaces that we have. When we initially developed the plans for the town beach, the major concern that Matunic residents had at that point was that this needed to stay as a rural beachfront. And we have tried to be true to that concept. We can get additional parking in some of the green space that's there, but we're not going to be looking to develop any new areas. It'll just be within the confines of where that red project line is. And those are the programs that we're looking at. There'll be about $100,000 over the next 6 years that we should be setting aside to deal with playgrounds, parking lot enhancements, and run-of-the-mill types of things that need to be done on a year-to-year basis. That's a hostile environment for a building, and Rex and his crew do an excellent job in terms of getting that place ready for the use each year, but it becomes more and more of an expensive proposition as we go forward. We are not changing or building a new pavilion, we're relocating the existing one. So when you look back, that pavilion goes back to the initial construction, which goes back to, I think, the late 80s. So it's not a new building, it's going to be something that's going to be renovated, not created new. Terry, you want to comment on that project at all?
Just the latest update on the engineering services, which are in the process right now for just designing the substructure for the pavilion to be set on, are just about complete, and we're looking to be able to bid out the project, both the relocation and the septic installation, in February at some point. So we have an aggressive timeline to be able to get the beach up and running for the summer, but we hope to be able to accomplish that. And again, the funding, besides the capital funds, are coming through FEMA, Sandy monies, and also dollars from the original flooding of 2010.
Have the operational costs been covered by the revenues and the fees? And secondly, last few years, have we gained use of the beach?
Since I've been here, the beach covers its costs in terms of operations. We have seen an increase each year in the revenue stream. So we actually had a very good summer this past summer. Have added storage units. People seem to be utilizing it. We've also, because of our reasonable fees, with the state having gone up recently on their fees, maybe have attracted a few more customers. So we're in good shape.
The beach operations cost is between $105,000 and $110,000 a year. Between the beach receipts and the programs that are operated, the surfing programs that we offer as far as the training and all, anything that's coming out of that property itself is more than paying for what our expenses are.
Carol?
Is the new pavilion, well, the renovated pavilion, going to include the beautiful boardwalk that we used to have that got eaten up by the hurricane? It's just going to be
It's-
exactly like it is?
Just that structure.
So we're not going to add that, what do you call
There's the
that?
potential
That
for
boardwalk with
maybe
an arbor?
revisiting that
I thought that
front
looked
seating
really
area. Oh,
nice.
it was beautiful.
Yeah.
But this particular project is just moving what we have left back to a safe zone.
And we're not going to improve it in any way? I mean, we're just going to move it?
At this point,
At
that's,
this point, the plan was to get it moved, make sure that we could get it moved. And, you know, if there's boardwalks, the only boardwalk that we're gonna create here is to make sure that we've got the ramping, the handicapped accessibility to the pavilion. From there, certainly we would like to see additional, and we'll look at that with the capital program that we develop next year and see whether there's something we can do.
And what about a kitchen, so that you could have like hamburgers and french fries and all that stuff?
There really isn't a kitchen there.
No?
No. Everything is on the cot itself. There was when we first developed the beach project and we had the informational hearings, the public did not want a kitchen facility located there, and they didn't want concession stands. And the council at that time listened to what the public wanted and said, we're going to really build a rural beach pavilion which will have restroom facilities, shower space, and that's it. And what they did is they spent all of their money in terms of building the boardwalks. I mean, the original boardwalks went down all the way to to where the volleyball nets were. And there was 4 seating areas that we lost. In addition to about 120 linear feet on the waterfront from the pavilion itself. So yeah, we lost a great deal of what was constructed. But the council at the time knew what they were doing in terms of what they wanted to accomplish was to be able to provide the boardwalks more than they were looking to provide anything that would allow for concession stands.
Meg?
I just have a quick question. From what I'm understanding, that I gather this is just going to be strictly a construction process and project, if you will. There's not going to be any architectural needs that will be coming in to help?
We've had to hire engineering services, and what we did is we've hired the engineering services from Parr Associates, who were also the engineers that did the initial design for us. That way, just like with Dugway Bridge, we're dealing with the same people that did the initial design, so that they will be able to design the proper pilings. So there is engineering work that's done, not architectural, but engineering in terms of the pilings that have to be set for us to be able to pick up that building and relocate it.
I just have to say, I'd like to see something a little nicer, nicer looking. I mean, it's cute, but we really could beef it up a little bit, like shingles, wooden shingles, and I don't know. Something a little dressier, that very beachy, but
right. One of
I don't know.
one of the issues with receiving funding through REMA and FEMA was a benefit cost analysis that had to be done, and replacement of the structure was not an option.
yeah.
And based on what we generated as a budget, we were only able to gain so much funding through FEMA, which allows us simply to move the structure, the existing structure.
Just seems a lot of work for really no difference, other than you're going to save it. You're moving it back, and it'll be fine, but
The cost
I
actually
know what you're
equated to about half of what it would have been to construct a whole new facility of that same size.
Now, we could take a look at it and see what we could put together as a program, and look at that in terms of the next capital program that we present to you.
yeah, I think it could be beautiful, a showpiece, a nice little, it doesn't have to be huge, but it could be a really beautiful little beach setting, facilities, and
It was a beautiful
It
facility.
was.
it was.
beautiful. And it disappeared.
I know. But the boardwalks made a big difference, as we all know.
Like everything else, I wish we could do it all. There's certain limits that we have, but the next element is on the senior services program. And senior services program is shown on pages 44 and 45 of your budget document. There are a few components here. One is that the Senior Services Special Revenue Fund is set up to manage both the adult day services component, the senior facility, as well as the other buildings that are on site, either the annex or the barn. We also have to deal with the transportation element itself, where we're showing you monies that will be put out for the van. We're looking at the van replacement. That won't occur until the year 2019-20, but we will be showing $70,000 in the later years, the last 3 years of the capital improvement program, to get ready for that van acquisition. Van acquisition will probably be somewhere in the $100,000 to $110,000 range. So what we're looking to do is to put aside about $70,000 during this capital period, and then we'll be ready for one last year. That would be in the 20-year to pay for those costs. Stay on that for a minute. The several things that need to be done is over the next 6 years, there'll be upkeep on the interior of the adult day services. What we're looking at there is approximately $20,000 that would go into those activities. Some of that is replacements on carpeting as well as replacements of furnishings. The chairs that are used there that are quite expensive chairs need to be replaced from when this program initially started. So we'll have those type of dollars available over the term. At the senior center itself, it's just keeping the facility up, whether it's interior painting, carpeting, or wallpapering. One of the main things that we've seen, the building now was built over 10 years ago, and we're running into difficulty as far as replacement equipment on the HVAC systems. So we've had to set up a HVAC reserve within our capital funds. What we're seeing is that replacement costs, you may want to talk to this, Terry, as far as the number of units. I think there's 4 units there.
There's actually a total of 6 units on the roof of the center, and they've begun over the past couple of years to show some wear and tear just from the exposure to the elements. The last year, we replaced just about a full, it wasn't the entire unit, but the main components of the unit, which ran in the vicinity of $7,500. We're seeing that, actually currently we have another unit that's just starting to fail, and that will most likely need to be replaced. So we're looking at, over the course of the next few years, probably replacing each one of these units at anywhere from $7,500 to $10,000.
It seems hard to believe that you're talking about us occupying that building now for almost 14 years. So, I mean, we're starting to see the costs for continued maintenance start to escalate on that building. If you recall, before we constructed that building, the entire senior program was being operated out of what is the annex. The annex is still being used by the seniors program. There's a number of activities that occur there, anything from knitting or there's some storage. There's also some of the classes that are provided occur within that building. We need to do some enhancements on that building to deal with both the window replacements and door replacements, and there's some leaks on the roof, so there's some shingle repairs that need to be made. We're looking over the 5-year term to spend about $45,000 on improvements with that annex facility. We continue to see more and more activity in our senior program. In our existing building, we really need to have the annex available to continue to accommodate the multiple programs that are ongoing. The bond, we don't have any money set aside for that this year or over the capital project. That's just for cold storage at this point. Terry certainly could find enough uses for it if we had money to put into those activities at this point. But our objective would be to get the annex really fully up to snuff before we did with the cosmetics dealing with the bond itself. And I've already mentioned the van. Our senior transportation program operates with one full-time van. We have to have a second van available for when that van's in for service or is down. What we do is the van that's online every day, when that's traded in, will become the backup unit. We will trade in what is the current backup unit. Usually we buy the vans through the state RIPTA program as a, and so we can get a price because they're buying them by the dozens where we would be buying them by the singles. So we're looking probably in the 1920 year, which is when that van would need replacement. There's no questions.
Steve,
Yeah,
I promised that I would bring this up when we got to the senior van by a few parents in town. And I think I've mentioned this before at the town council table. Is there any way in the future there could be a cost analysis to add transportation for the disabled population that is not seniors? Do we have, the second question is, do we have an approximation of the riders that ride the senior van per day? Is it full to capacity?
I don't have approximately, it depends on the day, because we have different programs that run. Some days are shopping, some days are private transport to appointments, medical, those types of things. It fluctuates.
What's different?
We have approximately 200 unduplicated riders that use the van regularly, multiple times a week, either to the senior center or shopping or to appointments.
And I read in the senior center newsletter that there is now a fee. Is it like
Last year,
$1
or
or
this current
something?
year, we implemented a fee for non-senior center transportation. So if someone is being transported to the senior center, there's no charge for them to come to the meal site or take part in programs. If they are going somewhere in town, there is a one-way fee of 50 cents.
It's all around trip?
This is very nominal. Many communities charge, have a pass program or charge a greater fee. At this point, we're fortunate to be able to still fund this program without having a major impact on people's finances,
Right.
which is,
And I know, for example, there are a couple of visually impaired people that I know in town that really have a very difficult time getting around, and the state will give them, I think it's $4.40 for a pass, but they have to get, transportation from their home into town to pick up the bus, maybe to get to URI. And I think that, and I plan on getting over someday to talk to Jill Kramer, I think that if our disabled population, if they're not seniors, can still ride the van into the senior center, pick up door to door, go to the senior center, but it's the banking, the shopping, things like that, that is not permissible.
right, because the center allows for the federal meal site to allow disabled to attend, that's why they're able to come to the center via van. But other services, not at this point. And that's certainly a policy decision.
Town. So I guess what my follow-up question is if the state provides, I don't know what a ride pass is, if it's $4.40, something like that, and that was able to come to the town for, somebody who's visually impaired to get a ride over to URI or something similar to that, is that something that the town would possibly look at, or totally out of our purview, seeing that it's $1.50 both way, if they could pick up $4.40?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
certainly something that would have to be analyzed in terms of
Cost
the
analysis.
need and cost analysis.
Right.
One of the things that I would point out is that because of the size, the geographic size of our town, the van
Right.
travels as far as Green Hill, maybe for one person. So while some days our ridership may be low, the van is on the road all day
Right.
because of the location of our riders.
Right. Actually, one person in particular is in that area,
Right.
who actually was looking for some transportation,
Oh,
to
okay. A
URI.
non-senior?
So, if that van's going down there anyways, and we have somebody who's visually impaired, living in an area or disabled, and there's a route, I'm going to keep bringing it up until, maybe someday. I know I sat through that bus transportation thing that we had at the town hall, and my parting question, at the end of that is, what do we have for our disabled population who is not 1 mile from a bus line? And there's really nothing. So, it's, as a town, I think we're supposed to be representing all, and I think that there's a minority out there that I would like to see extended a little more. So anyways, it's my 2 cents worth. Thanks.
No, I think it's an important point that you bring up. I mean, I think that what you're looking at is that, do you get to a point where the service levels that you would need would require multiple buses? Because the cost of operating a bus on a yearly basis is about $70,000. Next year's budget, I think that I looked at today, was about $67,200 for that program. And all of that comes out of property tax.
Is there any Medicaid, kickback with any of that
No.
for the transportation?
To my knowledge, no Medicaid dollars go towards transportation, but I could be wrong.
It's another question I'll ask.
We
Thank
will
you.
continue to look at it. I mean, I think the real question comes down is, we're getting more and more where the safety net that belongs at the state level is coming down to the local level. And we do not have any ability other than property tax to be able to pay for those services that we're assuming that are of a social service nature. And when that occurs, it provides impact to our low-income population, because then they have difficulty with an ability to pay to stay in the community. So whatever we do in terms of additional services, we've got to look at where are those costs coming from, and what's the impact associated with those costs if they do occur. So
The other thing that I think adds to that too, Steve, is, we used to have facilities where the disabled population would be transported, today, on a daily basis to do. And I think that looking at the function of disabled population in our community definitely has changed. I look at the LaPlante Center and, the closing down and reconfiguration of that, where a lot of, people got transported over there, and that now there's been a change in that. I look at the Guild program that we have with, I don't know, is there 8 young disabled people who are participating in a program? Tara, is it about 8? With the
The
LaPlante?
skills program
Right.
you're referring to?
Right, that's happening at the Guild with
had-
a woman from the LaPlante Center.
It fluctuates, but that has since changed because she now is back
She's
with
back.
the
Okay.
LaPlante Center and her
So the Guild's
function.
not offering that anymore?
We would offer it if there were a need, but the focus has now shifted
Gone
back
back
to
there.
the folks at the LaPlante
See, I
Center.
didn't know that. And were there about 8 young, people with disabilities? Was it about 8 to 10 that was coming to the?
I would say probably in that vicinity, but I can't,
Right.
I would have to check, depending on what the program was. It depended on what they were interested in.
Right. Thanks.
Welcome.
all right.
Carol?
I
Carol?
just wanted to say, I think Ella has a good point here, and I guess one of my questions would be, how many disabled people do we have in the community that would qualify for something like a bus ride? And I don't even know if we'd have those numbers, but that might be something.
It's
to
good.
look
It's a
into.
good follow-up question, Carol, because, I'm familiar with a lot of the families, and I think it may be about 8 to 10. I don't think there was a large number, but I could be wrong. But it would be nice to find out how many kids are we actually talking about, young adults, And with aging parents, the parents are not going to be able to keep transporting, and I hate to see anybody having to sit home that's been, active in our community, so.
And it does seem like there should be some kind of state or federal aid to help these people get around, and if we could benefit from that, and they could benefit from it, it's a win-win. If the disabled population could also benefit, so.
I know that I've been recently working with a family, and there is a need to get over to the University of Rhode Island, and I think it's going to be 2 days a week, and the state has only offered, what are they called, triptychs or something like that, and I think they're worth $4.40, and, you know, this person is visually impaired and does need to get to URI. So,
I think it becomes a policy issue and a decision, you know, for the council in terms of this is not really a senior services related issue,
Medicaid.
but
right, the Medicaid piece, and I know I'm working with the Office of Rehabilitative Services to try to get that transportation, and, you know, I'm going to be giving a good fight for that person to try to get that, but would like to see maybe the town have something for our youthful disabled at some point down the future. Thank you.
We will take a look and see what we can do in terms of research to find out what information is available, because it's not just the children that would be disabled that would need that type of service or be eligible for it. It would be of any age.
Right.
But the senior groups that are disabled, they probably qualify anyway. So I guess we'd be talking somewhere between 18 and whatever the senior number is, I don't know. How, is it what?
60.
60, ooh, okay.
So, yeah.
Maybe you could look into, also, I know, because I have somebody who comes into our office on a quite frequent basis, but she utilizes the RIDE program. So maybe you could look into what the RIDE program is doing. She lives right near, right off Robinson Street. Maybe you could look into what the RIDE program does and has available versus what we could do so that we could supplement the need that there may be, because not everybody's being serviced, if you will.
Well, the RIDE program is what is available. And actually, a lot of our daycare clients are transported via the RIDE program, as well as folks who come to the senior center who live outside of the town limits. And so that is an option. That is portal to portal. I'm not sure in terms of the eligibility for
I think you have to live
Non-seniors.
you have to live 1 mile within the bus line. So being a
Okay,
community
yeah.
that we are spread out, there are many people that are not eligible. So it's a good point, Meg, too, even if we had some transportation to get them to, you know, a ride, you know, pickup that they could then switch and go from there. That is another option. So, thank you.
All right, let's move on. The next area that we're going to go into is the pay-as-you-go portion of the budget that deals with parks and recreation programs. And that's going to start on pages 90, I think it's 94. Sorry, 90. There's really two elements within the Recreation and Parks program. One is for the park facility improvements, and the second is for equipment replacement and acquisition. The first component for rehab is $110,000 in the 14-15 year for renovations on several different parks. For 14-15, we're looking at Green Hill tennis courts, resurfacing of two of those of the tennis courts. Those courts were last done in 2003 as far as the resurfacing and the lining. The Saugatucket Park basketball court needs to be redone. It's not just the surfaces itself, it's also, when you look at this, it's the fencing around the facilities. Again, there's the Green Hill Park. The Saugatucket Park basketball court, which is at the end of High Street, is certainly in need of being redeveloped. We've got the grass growing up in the middle of the courts themselves. That would be done in the 14-15 year. The West Kingston Park, the tennis courts, they need to be repaired and resurfaced, where we're ending up with damage. this goes back, West Kingston, we built those in 1994. The last time we did any service on them was 2001. There's 2 courts there that we would be addressing with the repairs. And this usually will occur on about a 5-year cycle. The Marina Park improvements, we've already talked about those. They're in the $10,000 is in the pay-as-you-go portion of the budget for that parking lot improvements. The tennis courts at Old Mountain Field, it's a multi-year program that we're looking at. There's 2 years. This is the first of the 2 years, where it'll cost about $80,000 to be able to redevelop those tennis courts. We talked about the beach program and where we're going with that, and Tuckertown restrooms. We've been dealing with the Tuckertown restrooms for a couple of years now. There's $35,000 for the total project cost. There's $15,000 that's being committed for the 14-15 year. This is the final year, so those renovations will be made this summer. So they will be totally reconstructed. Not the exterior of the building, but all of the interior. This you could have on Main Street.
Are you trying to cause problems here?
Well, I mean, you know, it's been suggested that that's all you need.
That's all we need.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't go there.
Says it with such a straight face.
The equipment acquisition.
Did you stay up all night thinking about these comments?
Equipment acquisition and replacement, there's three items. Pickup truck, a mower, and a front end mower. The pickup truck is a 2006 unit. It looks nice on the outside, but it's tough on the inside. It's got 74,000 miles at this point. We will not replace that until it needs to be replaced, but at the same time, we need to set the money aside for it at this point based on some of the problems that we're experiencing with it. And again, recognize that every time we end up with a vehicle that's down, it ends up meaning that our productivity in terms of the workforce goes down because we've got to shift people around and there's downtime. So it's not just the equipment being down, it's the labor as well. The 12-foot mower that needs to be replaced is about a $60,000 item, and right now has over 2,800 hours that have been used on that. The recommended replacement cycle on this is 5 years. We've had the unit since 2005, so it's exceeded that. These units have become much more expensive to acquire because of the new federal emission standards for diesel. And so we're seeing about a 20% cost increase on some of the diesel equipment that we're going to be acquiring in the future. The replacement of the 2003 front mount mower is also required. That one is usually on a 4-year cycle. And again, this is key. If this equipment goes down, we've got employees that are spending time at the garage rather than in the field being able to cut grass. If they can't cut the grass during the regular work schedule, then they're working on the weekend. If they're working on the weekend, it's a So it's important for us to make sure that we have the equipment up and running. And again, our policy is that the money goes into the capital reserve fund. The money doesn't come out of the capital reserve fund until there's justification that the equipment has a very short life that's left to it, and we'll then go out to bid to replace the equipment. Terry has held some equipment back as much as 1.5 years before acquiring it. And it's not because she's behind, it's because if Rex can keep the equipment up, it'll stay in operation. The senior program, we've already talked about. This is just the contributions that'll go into the capital reserve fund. And again, we talked about what the items would be at the facility improvements. As you can see, there's a lot of paint that's necessary here. One of the prettiest senior centers, I think, that is around in the state. The annex improvements, again, exterior shingles, excuse me, drawer entries. This was the, until 1990, this was where our mill site was located. This jumps us into, this gets us out of all the capital projects and now goes into the fair share development fees, which starts on page 80 of your document. The fair share development fees, I think council's well familiar with. They were required under Article 11 of the zoning ordinance. And what they do is we've got two different fair share fees, one for educational facilities and one for open space. Monies that are collected under fair share development fees or impact fees, as they were originally known, can only be used for capital facility to be able to address what the demands would be associated with a new population that's paying on those fees. So it can't be used for operation. It has to be used for facility development, not for redevelopment of existing facilities. The methodology for computing the impact fees, for the education impact fees, was last revised in 2010. And I'm going to skip through the slides and talk about how we set up the fee. We look at the cost associated with the middle school at Broad Rock. That facility, when constructed, was constructed at a cost of approximately $18.5 million, when you add in the cost of the borrowing associated with it. When I look at the cost, what we set up was to look and say we would want to recover 50% of the fees through fees to pay debt service and program costs, net of the state aid that would come in on the project. The state aid that was expected was about $5.5 million. And what we also decided, excuse me, is that if in fact we were ever going to be challenged on the impact fees, we would want to take an additional discount. Thank you. We would like to take an additional discount so that if it became a numbers issue in court, we would be able to show that we had documented what the value should be, and we had further discounted it by 25%. So the amount of money that we were looking to recover was about $4.8 million toward the cost of that facility. What we did is we looked at the building. The building has seating for 600. We expected that from 1990 forward, if it was going to be used as a middle school, children that were living in housing that had been constructed by 1990 would, half of the population that would go through Broad Rock would be students that were in existing housing. The students that went in housing that was constructed subsequent to 2000 would be paying the impact fee. So we figured half of the seats would be occupied by students that were coming into the community subsequent to the building being constructed in the year 2000. We assumed a 15-year life on those seats before major renovations. In the past, we had assumed that there would be 3 grades occupying that building. That changed in the year 2010-11. At that point, that's when the school redistricted the population, and at this point, there's only 2 grades that are using Broad Rock School and 2 grades that are using Curtis Corner. So when we want to look at the number of unique student lives that will go through the school that are in construction subsequent to the year 2000, we would have to take the 300 times 15 years, or 4,500 assumed seats, divide that by 2, because each student would be there for 2 years. So there'd be 2,200 and 50 maximum number of students that would go through that facility. When we look at the cost of the $4.8 million, dividing that by the 2250 would give you a cost of around $2,162. This is a change from last year. Last year, we were using an average of 3 grades through the school because there had been fluctuation. At one time, there was going to be 4 grades, then there was going to be 3, and it's been consistently 2 for the last 3 years. So I changed the formula so it would properly reflect that a student could only be there for 2 years to use that facility or part of the 300 seats. So what it did is it took the impact fee down from $3,244 in the current year down to $2,162 for the 2014-15 year. We've tried to keep current as far as the education fair share fees so that if there were a challenge that we would be able to mount a proper defense. When we look at the fees that we've collected to date, so far we've collected about $2.9 million in fees. We've expended about $3.5 million toward the debt service for this for that school facility. So this has been a major income source to pay down debt, but I want to, at minimum, try to keep this as consistent with what the actual school program that's being run through that school at any given time. Do I think we'll ever recover the full $4.8 million? The answer is no. I think that it's a target that we've used going back to when we first started this program, but I don't think that you'll ever recover the entire 4.8. The initial debt on this building is 20 years that would be paid off by the time we get into the year, I believe I think this borrowing goes out to around 2022. So even if we were collecting fees right up through the end of that, we're seeing a decline in the amount of income. It may be $100,000 a year going forward. So even if we look at another 6 or 7 years, we may be up at around 3.5 million of the 4.8 that we had used as a target. I think it provides better justification for us if we were to be required to defend that impact fee at a later time. I want to then move on to the recreation fair share fee, and I want to just work with that formula. Recreation fair share fee is set again by the zoning ordinance and requires that the capital improvement program define what that fair share fee would be based on what the estimated value is of an acre of land within the town. The value that we use is $105,000 per acre. The standard that was set up by the planning board was that every acre of land would service 1,000 people. And so we look at what is the number of people that occupy every residential unit. We set up 2 standards. One is for a single family unit, which would have 3 bedrooms, or really plus 2 bedrooms, and 2 bedrooms or less. So we were dealing with studio apartments, which would more be set for elderly population that we're seeing. And when we looked at the ratio based on census, the census said that if it was 2 bedrooms or less, the occupancy would be 1.95 people versus the 2.6 with a house that had over 2 bedrooms. When we look at that, that means that it would take $2,867 for a single household to provide for those 2.6 people if we were using $105,000 on a per acre basis. That is the same fee that's been in place for the last 3 years. So we haven't looked to change that at all. So the fee would stay at the $2,867. If it was a condominium unit that was 2 bedrooms or less, the fee would be $2,150. The next component of the fair share fee is to ensure that affordable housing units would have an opportunity to be exempt from the fees for the affordable housing unit. So what we had to do is to come up with a formula to look at what would you consider to be an affordable unit. The standard that was set up was to look at what was the median family income in South Kingstown. The last documented median family income in South Kingstown was in 2012, and that came in at $71,100. If that's the median family income, we have to look at what's 80% of that. 80% of that would be $56,000. So if we want to look at trying to define 80% of median family income should be eligible for affordable housing units without having to pay impact fees, it would mean that if they're going to use 30% of their income for housing purposes, and they are only making $56,880 for the annual income, they would only have $17,064 available for housing, or $1,422 a month. You take the $1,422 and you look at, well, what would the property taxes be on the house? It would be about $259 a month. And what would the mortgage insurance be at the 1% rate, which would be about $200. That meant that there was only an availability of $963 that could go toward a mortgage. A mortgage at $963 would allow somebody to borrow $201,000. So what we're looking at is that any house that would have a value of less than $201,000 would be eligible to apply for an exemption from the affordable housing exemption under the impact fees for both recreation and for education purposes. I've also provided you with what the state Rhode Island Housing uses. They look at affordable not at 80% of median family, but at 120%. If that were the case, they're assuming that affordable units would be up to $310,000. That has nothing to do with the program that the planning board set up for the exemptions, but rather is just illustrative of what state standards or interpretation is of what affordable housing unit cost should be. The last item that we have to look at on a yearly basis is the in lieu fee requirements that at this point we cannot use. As we said to you last year, the council in 2007 set up an in lieu of fee requirement that would allow a developer who's required under inclusionary zoning to provide we give a 20% bump or in affordable housing units that have to be added. Somebody's building a 20-unit subdivision, they can build 24 houses. 4 of those houses would have to be affordable units. The first priority is to have those units built within the subdivision itself and approved through the planning board. If the developer can prove that those units can't be constructed within the subdivision confine, then they would have the ability to apply to have the units scattered throughout the community. What they could do is they could buy a rental unit, a multi-unit rental unit, rehab that, and make those defined as affordable housing units, and they would have to be defined as such for a 20-year period. If they couldn't find a reasonable existing housing to buy or a parcel of land to be able to build those affordable units acceptable to the planning board, the third phase would be that they could apply to the planning board for a payment in lieu of building the units. So what we had to do is to establish, well, how do you come up with the price for that in lieu requirement? What we did is we looked at what the average house price in South Kingstown is at $295,000. We then looked back at what was deemed as an affordable housing value for exemption under the impact fee, which was the $201,000 number that we just looked at. That gives you a differential of $94,000. So what the planning board would be able to do is to say, okay, if you're not building within the subdivision, and you proved that you can't, you've proved was that you can't find additional space to build those affordable units someplace in the community proper, or that you cannot buy existing housing, upgrade it, and place deed restrictions on it, making it affordable for the future, then the planning board would have the opportunity to say, well, we'll allow you to pay $94,000 to the town that will be placed into the affordable housing special reserve fund, so that the town would have that $94,000 to go toward some type of affordable housing activities. Unfortunately, the courts took the position on a East Greenwich case that the General Assembly did not give the enabling authority specifically to cities and towns to be able to have an in lieu requirement. The provisions available for inclusionary zoning, but the provisions are not available without the specific exercise by the General Assembly to give the cities and towns the right to do the in lieu requirement. On a yearly basis, we're going to continue to set that amount in hopes that the General Assembly will provide the enabling authority to the cities and towns. That certainly is something that will be fought by Rhode Island Builders Association and a number of other housing interest groups. But if the legislation were passed, you would have this in place within your capital program so that you wouldn't be looking to define it after the legislation, but it was be in place before. Vin, do you want to speak on this issue at all? As to whether the legislation has been pre-filed or?
I think the in-lieu fee is an important tool for communities to utilize to promote affordable housing production where it can't be constructed on the site. Now, Steve, the progression he described is exactly what's in our ordinance currently. We had hoped last year that the Assembly would have taken this up as a, because the court case in their decision laid it out very clearly exactly what the requirements would be to establish this fee as an impact fee, so to speak, and what the basis would. They practically wrote the legislation in the I think Justice Flaherty, I believe, was the author of the opinion of the court. I know the housing advocacy community, as well as all the planners I've talked to, would like to see this as an available tool, not as a, because, you know, frankly, the resources to produce or to encourage the production of affordable housing across the state are woefully inadequate, and if one of the tools available is taken away, then, you know, you're further behind the eight ball in terms of trying to, you know, have a balanced housing stock available to, you know, a lot of this is workforce housing we're talking about, so, you know, it's $56,000 a year, you qualify under the town's exemption, so, I mean, we're not, it's an important tool, and it's hoped that it will be taken up. I know the Housing Oversight Committee has met a couple of times, and I know this is one of the issues that they're considering as part of the whole ball of wax, but it would be nice to see a separate bill come forward, and I believe the Rhode Island APA will be pushing towards that, as well as like Housing Works Rhode Island. Not to say that everyone's in agreement that this is a great thing, like any legislation, but it's hoped that at least gets brought forward for debate and consideration.
Vin, I just want to add, we had a meeting with Washington County Regional Planning Council on Wednesday, and I had called Steve on Tuesday looking at that in the budget and brought that up to try to gain support from the 8 cities and towns. So we also had a dialogue there, and hopefully the next meeting with Washington County Regional Planning Council, we're going to prioritize some of what we want from each town with their legislators, and we'll put that on our, I'm sure, from South Kingstown. But you have the full support from Washington County Regional Planning Council on that.
That's great. I believe as well that the town's affordable housing collaborative will be likely producing some correspondence encouraging this issue to be undertaken by the legislature during this session.
Is there any legislative support for this, though, that you know of?
Well, I would, yeah, I would hope so.
I'm sure the builders, well, Steve mentioned that, the Builders Association, they're fighting tooth
Well,
and nail.
I think the reason that this was struck down in the first instance is the particular case of East Greenwich. They had a fee that was it was very high. It was paid early in the process before the production of any homes, and it wasn't really based on any particular calculus. In our case, and I think a lot of the communities, there was at least some thought given as to what was a reasonable fee in lieu of. I do think we've had conversations with developers that, you know, I think some of the local developers in our community would like to see this as an option because a lot of times it may not fit well. We have had a few circumstances to this point where housing has been rehabilitated off-site versus, and so I think having, you know, the full array of resources, at least regulatory-wise, would be helpful to our locally.
I think one of the problems is that because building is down, I mean, there isn't much new construction going on, not like there was years ago. And I think that's what the Builders Association is saying, you know, let the economy get back before we put this in, or they're probably fighting it all together. But I just think that that could be one of the issues why the legislature won't act on this, because of the economy. Because it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. I mean, I
Right,
agree with you.
that may
It
be
makes
the
a lot of
case. I
sense.
mean, but, you know, affordable housing is also an economic development issue if you look at it more globally. People have to live somewhere to work, you know, work.
But
and-
are
and
any
the
of these
housing-
builders getting away with not doing anything? I mean, if you prove that you can't build it on site and you can't find any off-site, I mean, how many people can actually get away with that? How many builders are getting away with that?
Well,
I mean, why would, you know, if I was a builder, I'd be like, I'd find an off-site if I could, because why spend that kind of money? Because you can't recoup that. You know, where a builder could build an extra few units and recoup some money.
Well, I think, you know, as the economy has improved, we have produced a few homes under inclusionary zoning as well as off-site rehab, and I think and things are improving. We're seeing more interest in, you know, it's not a panacea, but it's a
Right.
means to encourage. You know, the affordable housing issue is multi-layered. You know, there has to be resources from other places other than just regulatory and the local level. It is a delicate balance, but it is a community need both here and our sister communities across the state. So.
And I think looking at the affordable housing guidelines, there's a whole study going on with that, and the General Assembly has their ears open. So I think
We've had
that'll
two
be a
meetings.
piece working together with this in lieu of fee.
I mean, Steve mentioned the 120% of median, which qualifies under state law as affordable, and that works out to be a $300,000 home. That's not really targeted to need, and in a lot of circumstances, those are very difficult to sell. Builders have opted towards that, and those marketing difficulties because they're too close to the market rate of the cost, because you're looking at an income of, what, $90,000 or thereabouts, and people will say, well, why would I buy something with an encumbrance on the equity or growth of equity? And so I've seen, there's been circumstances where those units have been produced and languished because of the pricing of them. So, you know, it's an issue that's in flux, and I hope the Legislative Oversight Committee will come up with a good repurposing or refocusing of the legislation, and hopefully that includes the in lieu fee in some form.
Any other questions?
Questions here at the table?
That concludes our presentation.
Well, again, thank you, Steve, for a thorough presentation, and it was great to have a dialogue back and forth about many of our valuable, wonderful resources here in our town. And again, thank you to all of the staff, Not only are we rich in resources, but we're rich in valuable administration and staff in this town, and we're very lucky to have all of you. So with that said,
There it is. That's what we want.
We want that back.
We want that
We
back.
want that back.
That's the section that was lost with the hurricane. It was a major piece that was there that, you know, many people used. And
Oh, yeah.
we'd like to get those reclaimed, but
but
cost of
looking
that
at,
construction is very high.
looking at that, it was so close to the water, and where we're setting this back so far away to put that, I mean, 2050, you know, I see putting that back on, but if we put that back on, it's really not going to be overlooking any water, because it's not even close to the water.
Yeah. You could still see it.
But anyways, it was beautiful.
It was
Hopefully, we
nice.
will have it back someday.
Get billions.
Put binoculars.
We need something, some kind of fancy, something.
Even a sunset viewing, platform, something.
I mean, I'm still amazed when I look at that and I say, how could that disappear with the storm and never have one
Find a
piece
piece.
of wood found of it?
It's unbelievable. With that said, how about a motion to adjourn? We have a second? We have a second. Any more discussion? I'm just going to, before we adjourn, just ask the public if there's anything. And there's really nobody here, so. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries, and we are officially adjourned at 8:16. Thank you. Can you all